Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Is it working? Let's see. Yes. Yeah. Yep. All right. So if you're logged in here, please mute me or mute yourself. Otherwise, and probably mute your sound because you're going to hear me come through your your computer as well. Again, we'll wait one more minute just to be fair to everybody who's supposed to be here on time, and then we'll get moving on this. Okay. All right, guys. Good morning. Welcome. We are COMP2112. That's Advanced Client-Side JavaScript. I kind of think of this as, I like to call it Advanced Client-Side Scripting, because it's not going to be JavaScript, just JavaScript this semester. It's also going to be TypeScript, and we'll talk about that this semester as well. So this is me. My name is Tom. I'll be your instructor this semester. A little bit about me. I started teaching at Georgian in 2011. So that was like my kind of my first teaching job coming out of the software engineering industry. Of course, I'm a gamer, right? That's what I am. And I've been developing video games as well as one of the things I do. So that's me. And I've got lots of I guess, experience with JavaScript, TypeScript, and web technologies. So I'm really excited to teach this course with you guys because this is kind of a precursor to server-side scripting, right? Which is, I think, the next one in line for you guys in terms of the scripting courses you're going to be doing. So just before we begin, and I told you a little bit about me, how about you guys? Do you guys know anything about Node.js? Any hands about Node.js? So if you've done Node before. Yes, no, maybe no. I got a couple of people. We will be using Node.js, and we're going to be installing it today, but only as a tool this semester. So we're going to be using Yarn and NPM as package managers so that we can install our JavaScript libraries and that kind of stuff this semester. So although we won't be using it as a server-side solution until the last part of semester, I'm going to introduce Node and Express to you probably week 12 and 13, just to get you guys going with it. And so the next semester, you'll transition nicely into the next semester, and you'll already have some experience with Node and Express. That's what I want to get you guys to. So when you do another course with whoever the instructor is going to be for server-side scripting, then you're going to be fine. So that's me. I've been an ambassador for TypeScript from the very beginning. JavaScript is a difficult language to learn and to master, although it seems easy. It's a scripting language. And you guys should know at least a good amount of JavaScript at this point, right? But I'm going to tell you that I want to try and make you as, kind of experts by the end, if I can, right? And by the time you're finished next semester, which is server-side scripting, you should be very, very comfortable using JavaScript. If you don't love it already, I'm hoping that you will next semester. All right. Some people don't like JavaScript because it's so unstructured, right? Because if you've done C# or Java or some other programming language, you're like, JavaScript is spaghetti code. It could be, right? Or we could structure it and so it can be beautiful. So let's do that together this semester. The way I'm going to evaluate you in this class is because we've missed last week was Labor Day. And we're also going to miss Thanksgiving Day, right? Because that's also on a Monday. We only have 12 short weeks together. And I know it sounds like a lot of time to get everything done, but I have a ton of things to show you this semester, and we always have very little time. The course content that I have is for 4 hours, not 3 hours. Okay, so I'm going to be giving you as much as I can in the 3 hours that we have. And the reason why I gear it for 4 hours is because I don't just teach at this institution, I teach at other places as well. And this is not something new for me. Although it's new here, and the way I've put things together this semester is new for Georgian. Okay, that's what I've done. So the way I do it is I don't like quizzes. I think they're a waste of time in general. Like true, false, multiple choice type tests are probably not great, to really test you. I mean, sure, you might remember some stuff from last week or whatever, but we can talk about it as opposed to like me testing you on it. However, I do like in-class exercises. So what I'm going to be doing is every single week we're together, there's going to be an in-class exercise that's going to be due. Some of them are going to require little short videos. Just going to let you know in advance. Like some of them, like today, will not. Okay, so we're not going to get you to do a video today. And the videos aren't going to be like, when I say short videos, I mean like a minute, maybe 2 max. And you come up, you show me your thing, and then see you later. One of those, just to prove that your application works, whatever we're building together. So those, I'm taking the best 8 out of 10 in-class exercises because we only have 12 total classes together. 2 of them are going to be midterm tests and final exam kind of stuff. So I only have 12 total classes with you, including this one. And so I can only do 10 in-class exercises, and I'm only going to take the best 8. So if you miss 2, or if you do badly in 2, or you don't understand 2, you still can get 100%. Okay, in the in-class exercises. So let's say, for example, someone missed today, then it's okay because you're still 100% because I'm taking the best 8 out of 10. Assignments. The first one's going to be worth 8%. I'm going to give it to you next week. It'll be due week 5, right? And you'll get assignments after that, and they're all going to be worth 10% equally. Some of them are easier than others, right? As an example. So although they're pretty much equally weighted, and the reason why I've done that is so that way, even if it's more complex, it's the same as the one that's easier. And so it kind of evens out to be a pretty good mark. Okay. Your midterm test and your final exam are practical tests. And I'm not going to require you, I'm not going to look over your shoulder to do them. I don't do that. All right. So this is your course. This is you learning JavaScript and being the best you can. I'm going to give you a test on the Monday, like today, and I'll give you until the end of the week to get it done. It'll be like a short weekly exercise that you're going to get done. It'll be kind of integrating all the things we've talked about in the previous weeks. So if I asked you to do something in the previous week, like we're going to do today, I'm probably going to ask you something similar on the test coming up on week 7. I'm not going to try and surprise you. Doing the best you can. No problem. I'm not going to surprise you or try and come up with some crazy stuff. I may extend something, or if I've talked about it with you in class, I may tell you ahead of time, I want you guys to look at this, and this is what I'm going to be doing on the test next week, that kind of thing. But I'm going to try and make it so there's no surprises. It's literally going to be, I'm prepping you for the test every time we get together. So week 7, I've trained you to do the test. All right. If you've done everything that you need to do. If you haven't been here, or if you haven't done your assignments, or you don't do your in-class exercises, I think it's pretty killer. Again, 4 times 8, 32% of your final grade. You don't do your in-class exercises, that's terrible. It'll really impact your GPA. We don't want that. And because everything is practical, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, I look at the assignments again, most things are individual, right? There might be, I think assignment 3 and 4, the way I have them slated is for some group work. When I say some group work, it might be like 2 people, okay? Pair programming. I'm not going to give you more than that. And the only reason why I'm saying it might be 2 people for assignment 3 and 4 is because the quantity of stuff I want you to do, not because it's complex or whatever. So there might be enough for 2 people to do. Again, when you get assignments, you get at least 2 to 3 weeks to get them done, and they're kind of delving deeper into some of the topics that we're discussing in class. And again, they'll there'll be small examples of what could be on an exam. Okay, so that's almost like prep again for everything we're doing. All right. One more thing is that this syllabus is on Blackboard as well as the outline. So if you look at course information on Blackboard, this will be in all detail up there as well. In terms of our schedule, again, like we said, last week we missed week 1, so there was no nothing happening there. This week we're talking about how to set all our tools. I'm going to make some terrible assumptions today. I'm just letting you know. Here are the terrible assumptions. You'd never use Visual Studio Code before in your life. Okay, that's a terrible assumption. You should all know and be very, very skilled at using Visual Studio Code. I'm going to make that assumption because depending on how you set things up, you know, I will use Visual Studio Code my way, and I'm going to talk about it like you've never used it, right? If you've got Visual Studio Code installed, we'll rush by that part. I'm not going to do the whole reinstallation piece with you if you've already got it. All right, but if you haven't done it, then I'm going to ask you to do it. I'm also going to talk about Git and GitHub, and just a show of hands, anyone not used Git and GitHub before? So you've never used Git and GitHub, okay? How about you guys? You guys have all used it? Okay. All right, here's another show of hands. Who's used Git and GitHub command line? Okay, so I got maybe a few people using command. I'm going to be using command line the entire time. All right, so I'm going to ask it of you. However, I want to tell you also that I'm not going to monitor how you put stuff up on GitHub. I really don't care at the end of the day, but I think it's a really good skill set to have to be able to manage Git and GitHub with command line. Okay, I don't think it's a good idea not to know that stuff. So I'm going to be talking about it from today, and my expectation today is you try and follow along with command line. All right, here's the other one. Who has a Mac? Who's using a Mac as their primary machine in this class? Anybody? I really hope not. All right. And not because, again, not because I don't like Macs or I'm not familiar with Macs or whatever. It just makes it so it's a little bit more complex in terms of installation and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't know if anyone had a Mac or not, and if you don't, okay, good. So at least everyone's on the same page. We're all using PCs. Other things that we're going to be talking about today are what's an IFI. And we'll talk about what that is in a second, or not in a second, but today. We'll do a brief JavaScript review today. We're also going to be using Bootstrap and Font Awesome because this is not a CSS class, right? So I don't expect you guys to focus on CSS, although because you guys are web dev students, in my mind, since you guys have all the foundations for CSS and HTML and everything else, I'm going to demand those things of you anyway, right? Because by now you should have a good foundation in how to do CSS and HTML. We're also going to do a progressive enhancement revisited kind of a review. You guys should also know what progressive enhancement is. Yes or no? Yes? No. Okay, good. So then we'll talk about it for the first time. It'll be like 2 slides, right? And I'll talk about what that is. And that should take most of our time today, setting up the project, talking about how to do so, and all those kind of things. Especially when it comes to setting up NVM, which is something that is probably going to be new to most of you. And then once we do all our tools set up and everything else, we'll get into some JavaScript and that kind of thing. So really the in-class exercise today is let's get everything set up, put it up on GitHub, and good to go. So it's a really easy 4%, I think, for you guys. Next week, we're going to get into TypeScript, and just want to talk about TypeScript for a second. TypeScript is the brainchild of Microsoft and Google, actually. When Google was developing Angular with Microsoft, they worked together on that. They needed a better tool than just JavaScript. JavaScript, like I said earlier, can be unstructured depending on how you run things, right? So what TypeScript does is it adds type support for JavaScript. Some people call it syntactic sugar, like they add syntax on top of. That's what it's called, syntactic sugar, or a superset of JavaScript. At the end of the day, TypeScript is JavaScript with extra stuff. right? And then what ends up happening is we need to transpile. I'm a Trek person, so Star Trek person. So I'm thinking transport, transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. And that is something we need to learn how to do. So why TypeScript? TypeScript is one of the most demanded languages right now, kind of in the workplace. And we're also going to combine TypeScript with React later on this semester, which is part of what we're doing. So also, when you get into doing server-side scripting, again, if you were with me, I would do TypeScript with Node, right? So that's the way to go. And for you to learn TypeScript, Node, Express, backend, blah, blah, everything together is too much. That's why we're breaking it up like this. So you're learning it now. And this course really is prep for the more difficult course, which is server-side scripting, all right? So that's how I see it. So TypeScript is something we're going to learn, and hopefully you're going to love it as much as I do, okay? And I've been using it since its inception. Okay. So that's happening next week. We're also going to be talking about Ajax. And that's why I say revisited, you should know something about Ajax. If you don't, then we're going to talk about it. I'm also going to give you just enough jQuery to make Ajax easier and dangerous, right? So because jQuery is an old JavaScript library. It's been around since the early days of the web when CSS2 was around, and we didn't have really great support for JavaScript. Browsers some of them supported JavaScript and some of them didn't. And, the JavaScript libraries out there were pretty much very lightweight. And jQuery came out and made things easier for us. And, but jQuery is out there. There's a lot of jQuery out there right now. jQuery has been written. And as developers, you need to be able to identify it, work with it. I don't expect you guys to have it as your main focus by any means. Because nowadays you can do everything with JavaScript, and you don't need jQuery, but it's out there. And I want to talk about it a little bit, just 1 week. So you get some of that. We're going to make a 5-page site with Ajax. And what I'm going to be doing with you over the, several weeks after that is we're going to build full CRUD. So create, read, update, delete with something called local storage, which is a kind of client-side web technology that allows you to mimic or mock up a database. It works pretty good. And then we're gonna this idea is going to morph into something called a single-page application. And React is built out of technologies like Ajax, asynchronous technologies like Ajax. So is Angular and Vue and a bunch of other front-end frameworks. And so what I want you guys to do in the beginning is get experience building your own very, very small single-page application, doing your own client-side routing and all those kind of things before we even touch React, all right? And then maybe you'll appreciate what React does for you when you get it. Otherwise, you get React, and you're like, wow, this is really cool. But what's the underlying technologies? I want you guys to understand those things. And that's why we're going to get those by week 5. We'll have no lecture on week 6 because of Thanksgiving. And again, I may do a bonus exercise during that time. I'm not going to guarantee it. We'll see how things go with the stuff we already have. There might be quite a bit of stuff I've given you by then. And then week 7, we'll do a midterm test. And again, like I said earlier today, you could do it from home. You could do it from here. If you want me to help you, I'll be here on the Monday, but you'll have the entire week to get it done. Okay, so it won't be like a timed exercise where I look over your shoulder. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's really a reasonable test for you, especially where I'm going to give you some stuff to do that is basically, like I said, an integration of everything we've learned. One thing I will do for tests is I'm going to try and meter them for about 3 hours. All right. So even though you have the entire week to get it done, I'm not going to make it so that it's like, a 10-hour test. That doesn't make any sense for me. Right. So I'm going to assume that we're all in class and you get it done within the 3-hour period. However, you can take the entire time and you can submit by the end of the week. And then we're into our mid-semester break. Any questions about the first half of semester or concerns? Okay, moving into the second half, this is where we talk about web frameworks. What are web frameworks? A little bit more in detail. We'll do an intro to React. We'll talk about React components. We'll combine React and TypeScript. We'll talk about React hooks in week 9, and we'll talk about the React router. We'll rebuild our single page application with React. We'll do full CRUD with React in week 10. We'll talk about the Fetch API and Axios. Is it a better API than the Fetch API? I think it is. I'll show you why at that point, and you'll learn what Axios is. We'll talk about authentication with React in week 11, and we'll get our front end ready for a back end, right? Almost as if it's going to be fed by, instead of being fed by local storage, it'll be fed by an API, which is what I want you guys to do by next semester. So next semester, you're going to learn how to build an API, right? And server-side scripting. You know, and you'll start off learning Node and Express. I'm ending off learning Node and Express, like I said. So it'll be a nice dovetail to that semester, is what I'm hoping. And then you'll have your final test, which most likely will be everything to do with React in the second half. Chances are, again, if we look at the content, assignment 3 and 4 will all be about React and TypeScript. And assignment 1 and 2 will all be about Ajax, your single page application, building a 5-page site, all that kind of stuff. The things that we've talked about in class every single time. So it's not like it's unrelated, all right? Everything should be related to everything else, as far as I see it. Okay. Any questions around the schedule for this semester? I think it's going to be good for you, the stuff that we're going to be talking about this semester. And I think, again, it's like, I think you have the benefit here at Georgian more than any other place that I've taught to have the time to learn everything. Everywhere else I've taught is like, I've done a boot camp on React in like 2 weeks, right? And that just doesn't make any sense, right? I could do it. Well, we could do anything in 2 weeks, right? But will you be good at it? Will you use it? Chances are not. And even when I've done React, after I've taught Node.js, I've done it the other way around, teach Node.js first and then do React on the front end to combine. People didn't use it because they're like, I got Express and I've got EJS. I don't need React. I don't need Angular. I'm good to go. It's true, right? So, so this way we're giving to you first. So then by the time you get taught by Rich, if I don't know if Rich Freeman's going to teach you, or there might be another professor that does server-side scripting stuff, then you've already have this. So then he could say something like, guess what, guys, this semester we're going to use React. You learned it last semester, we're going to use it this semester, kind of thing. And it'll be more review and you kind of integrating for next semester. So that's the idea behind this whole thing. And when I was talking with Scott, which is our coordinator, that was the plan. Okay. All right, so that is this thing. This is new. So again, so one thing I'm going to ask you this semester, because everything is new, all the content, the integration, everything we're talking about, is please bear with me, right? So I'm going to put together as much content as I can, as succinctly as possible. But there might be some times where I may not have 59 slides. I may only have 10 slides and we do a demo. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I just don't have time. Do you know what I'm saying? So be easy on me, guys. All right. So again, any other questions before we move on? Okay, so I need to talk about delivery one more time. So again, just one more time. So I'm on Zoom. Some of you are here with me, all right, as an example. I'm also on YouTube. So again, I have thousands of videos on YouTube. I do YouTube constantly. That's what I do. I'm not a YouTuber. I don't do that, but like I don't monetize. But what I do is record everything there. The stuff that I'm recording for you this semester is going to be unlisted. So if you have the link, you're good to go. If you don't have the link, you won't be able to find it. Not because I don't want people to find it, but this is just for you. This class is for your, for your benefit, not anyone else's. Let's continue. So this is what I want to do so far. I want to talk about if you don't have Visual Studio Code to set it up, and we can skip through this if you have it already. So is there anyone here in this class that does not have Visual Studio Code installed? Or how about this? The better question is, do you not know what the heck Visual Studio Code is, right? If you don't, for some reason or another, and again, there might be some people teleporting in here from some other program, another class, another professor who tried to use something else, like, for example, Visual Studio 2022 or WebStorm. Some people like WebStorm or something else. That's fine. But for me, it's going to be Visual Studio Code. So sounds like everyone is on Visual Studio Code. I put it up here anyway, just in case. Okay. So The next piece, then we'll skip to that, is version control, Git and GitHub. And now this is something that some of you may or may not do. So we're going to do this part, this version control piece. Then we're going to do, like I said, a Git local install. We're going to be doing the NVM and Node.js setup. We're going to be talking briefly about progressive enhancement, and then get right into the JavaScript demo, and we'll be done for the day. Okay. So with Visual Studio Code, again, I think it's a great little tool. Great thing about it for me is it supports JavaScript and TypeScript out of the box. In fact, it was written with TypeScript and React Native, from what I understand. And it's great because it gives you great support. In fact, if anything, I would say that Visual Studio Code is my standard when it comes to JavaScript. And here's the proviso: as long as I'm not doing .NET. If I'm doing .NET, then it's going to be Visual Studio 2022. All right, not 2019. And if you're doing another .NET course, I recommend updating your system to 2022 because that's where we're going to be moving to anyway. So that's the only time I use something else. I don't like some other things. WebStorm is okay, but it's proprietary, and you need to have a JetBrains license. Now, if you're someone who loves to use WebStorm because it's got great support, I'm not going to stop you from using any tool you want in this course. And you can get a free license for WebStorm if you sign up for JetBrains Education. So that's something that you can do for free as students. You can sign up and use WebStorm. WebStorm is an IDE, and Visual Studio Code is an editor, and I find that it's just more lightweight and it's great to use. So that's why we're going to be using it this semester. Let's talk quickly then about version control. Okay, and I know some of you said that you have it, and some of you may not know what this whole thing is and how to use it, but we're going to talk about it from a very high level. Back in the day when we started developing, we really didn't have a great version control system. We did things like, I don't know, I would have a project and I would zip archive it or RAR or whatever it would be, and then we'd label it like this: V1, V2, V3, V4, 5, or whatever. Or sometimes if I was like really careful, V0.1, you know, one of those kind of things, or 0.01 or something like that if it was a big, huge project, right? And then I would put it up on something like Google Drive or whatever. And that's how we would start, right? We didn't have Google Drive at the time, but it was something similar. We had networking, drives that were networked all over the place, and we had a network drive that we would share. So there's a problem to that. And the reason for that is because when we want to be able to track our changes. That's the real gist of version control systems. And the other reason why we want to use version control systems these days is for teamwork. And I'll talk about the three main reasons for using it. Again, I've written some of this stuff for you guys to read. I'm not going to read slides. That's another thing I don't do. I'm not going to read these slides and read them to you. I think that's really, really, truly boring. So I want to get to the actual stuff, the meat and bones of what we're doing this semester, which is code, right? That's what I like to do. So this is kind of how it would look. You have like a bunch of files, and you might add suffixes or something like that to the file, like review, fixed, or final, because you want to be able to identify what those files are about. You're like, what is this file? What is this project? Is it the final project? Is it a staging project? What am I doing? Problem with that approach is you really don't know the features that have been added. You don't know what you've done. And you know, everyone's naming convention is completely different. So if you're working with somebody else, you might look at it and go, wow, why did they do that? Right? We actually do that as developers, right? We look at people's code and we're like, that sucks. That's terrible, right? Heck, if you look at your old code 5 years ago, you might see something like, that sucks. That's terrible, right? And if you have 5 years ago coding experience. And 5 years from now, you may look back at what you're doing today and go, wow, that's terrible, right? One of the things we as developers hate to do is we hate to document anything, right? That's just general. We hate documentation and comments. We don't like to plan. We just like to you know, kind of spray and pray and see if we can get things done. But those are bad habits, and we want to get out of those things. And one of the things that we talk about here is this doesn't work. This naming convention where we start just, you know, changing the name of your project files to what you did, what feature you added, doesn't make any sense. So there was a need for us to have something a little bit more complete, more comprehensive. And again, people did other things like timestamps and as well, things like this, where they said something like, hey, 2019-0501, 2019-0502, you know, whatever it's going to be. And again, this is a really terrible way of doing things, because sure, we timestamp it or we put what it is, but now you're looking at maybe a ton of like files, and you're looking at it, trying to figure out which one is it that I need. What if I need to revert? What if I broke my build? I'm building something and then I got to go back to something that I had previously working. Which one was it? Was it this one? This one? Like, I don't know. And I have to open a bunch of stuff. So big waste of time. And sometimes there's corruption, right? I open up a file and I corrupt something else, and it's bad. So this doesn't work. And passing files on Google Drive to your friend, you know, to make things work, also just doesn't work. Doesn't make sense. Not, especially not in a large, you know, kind of a larger studio environment, or a place where you're going to be sharing code or collaborating with other people. We need to have a better system. So, so that's why we need version control. We wanted a way to do a couple things. Create a baseline when we look at our projects. So here's our baseline project, and then track changes. That's what I want to be able to do. Adds, removals, you know, modifications, all those kind of things. That's what we want to do with the way we code. And for that, we need something like some kind of version control system. So these are all the things. What I've written here is all the things that that I've just talked about, you know, just like in 4 or 5 slides or whatever. But basically what we want to know is a version control system, or VCS, tracks every change you made across every file, right? And allows us to understand, it gives us a trajectory of our development, right? We can look back and we have a timeline of what we've done, right? And I'm going to talk more about Git and GitHub in detail today, as well as in other weeks, because I want you to understand what Git and GitHub can do for you and why it can also be pretty dangerous. I'm going to talk about that as well. So I'm just going to skip through. So if I was going to sum up, the 3 main reasons to use version control are backup. You want to, like, what if your computer blew up, right? As an example, you're working at home, you're a remote worker and your computer's gone, right? Or, you know, you have a dog or a pet or something, and it did, you know, ate it or did something to it or whatever, or a young kid who, like, you know, tried to play piano on it and destroyed your code or something like that. It's all possible, right? And that would be a thing. Backup is a real good reason to use version control. It's something that's not part of your system. And when I say version control, I mean distributed version control, something online somewhere or outside of your current system. The other reason why is you want to collaborate with other people, and doing it with 01, 02, 03 and naming conventions don't work. You want to be able to collaborate with some kind of cloud service. So that's the second reason. And the third reason, of course, is tracking changes, or the reason why we use version control in the first place, right? So those are the 3 things. If I ever was to do a quiz with you, I'm not going to, or if I was ever going to interview you, I would say, so give me the 3 reasons why you use version control. Tell me why. And these would probably be the top 3, okay? A brief history. Back in the day when we first used version control, we used something called a locking mechanism. So a good example is this. Let's say, for example, you and I, we're working together. You're my partner, right? And sorry, your name is? Tyler. No problem, Tyler. So let's say Tyler and I are working together on a project, and you know, I'm working on a file and he wants to work on the same file. I can lock that file. And that locking mechanism prevents Tyler from working on it too, so we don't have a clash, you know, on what we're doing. A conflict is what we call that, right? So one of the earliest or first generation of version control systems had this locking mechanism built in. We only gave one individual access to a file at the same time. And, you know, there's some examples of different version control systems. One of them called source code control system. And the other one was called revision control system. Those are actual systems. That's what they were called. In the second generation, we used a merge before commit mechanism. And what this did was it allowed us to concurrently edit a file. Okay, so that was, so Tyler and I could work together on the same thing at the same time, no problem. And what this system used was centralized repositories. Subversion is an example of this kind of system. And Subversion was something that was It was out for a while. It's still out there now. I don't like it, right? By the way, locking systems like the first generation do exist even today, especially for the game industry. And one of the version control systems that's different from Git and GitHub is Perforce, which if you're a game developer, you might know about. It's the de facto standard. If they don't use Git and GitHub, they want to be able to use a locking system and all that kind of stuff. And they use depots instead of repos. Anyways, I digress. Let's go back to the third generation where we are right now. The third generation is decentralized. So again, first is locking, second is centralized, third is decentralized. And decentralized is like, I want to take, I have a local copy of my project, and I want to make a remote copy somewhere on another system, right? It could be on a cloud like GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab, or there's lots of other services out there that do something similar. What we do is we commit our local changes first. And then what we do is after we commit our local changes, we push everything up to our cloud system. That's what we do. And Git is a good example of that third generation system. So I want to talk about common terminologies and things that you should already know. And I'm going to assume for a second you don't. Okay, if you do, wonderful. But here are the common terminologies. Repository or repo. I'm going to say repo a lot. Okay, that's the place or the container that we store our files and our projects. Branch. This is something interesting. A branch almost is a line of development. If I think about a branch, it's a series of commits. And usually we have something called the main branch. It used to be called the master branch, but master, we don't use that word anymore. We don't use that word for the bedroom. We don't use that word for anything anymore. So they've converted everything to main, and you're going to see that. But back in the day, master was the way it went. And it really, what they talk about is this single source of truth. Almost like if I was developing a project, it's my main line of development. I might have other branches. For example, I might have a bug fix branch, or I might have a UI branch, or I might have a Tom branch. People do things, a lot of really weird things, right? But at the end of the day, what we do is we develop something on a branch. We don't touch the main branch, and then what we do is merge into it, right? That's typically our workflow. Okay. We're going to be doing some of this semester. Okay, maybe not as complex as this, having your own branch or whatever, but I want to talk about this so you understand the terminology a little bit. A commit. When we first do a commit the first time, it's a snapshot of your project. I'm going to call it snapshot all the time. Think about it as a baseline. When I'm doing my first commit, actually there's two conventions, first commit or initial commit that you're going to hear about. On GitHub, they use first commit. I use initial commit. It doesn't really matter. It means the same thing. What it means is I'm going to take a snapshot of your project files, create a baseline, and then we're going to track changes. That's what it really means. Head. Okay, and again, this is a reference to the most recent commit on the branch. It's usually the last one that you've done, and it's like the tip of a branch. Okay, so common terminologies. Merge. When we do merges, so again, we might have a main branch. This is the blue commits here, and then we might have some kind of feature branch. I want to add in a authentication or something like that to my application. And so I develop an authentication branch from the main branch. And then what I do is I merge it in. And once I merge it in, that technology becomes part of my main line of development, the single source of truth for my application. That's how it works. Okay. Yes.
If you're constantly switching between the branches,
we wouldn't switch. We don't do that. All right. So we leave the main branch alone, and we literally just work on the feature branch, whatever that is. Keep working, marching along. And it could be not just you, but multiple people doing the same thing. And then we merge things back in. Sometimes what ends up happening is you have a merge conflict, which is kind of what you're saying, right? That merge conflict needs to be moderated somehow. Okay, there's different ways of doing that. Sometimes in larger organizations, if you're working with a group of 4 to 6 developers, by the way, 4 to 6 is a special number for agile development, because small agile teams are 4 to 6 members. That's how we work with it. So if I'm working with 4 to 6 other or 5 people, 5 other people, we might have a merge party, right? We get together, have a little bit of pizza, you pass me your file, look at your file, you look at my file, we have a discussion around it, and we do it that way. If we're all working remotely, we might manage it in terms of a pull request, right? And what a pull request is I finish my branch, I make changes, and then one person in the team is the GitHub director. And what they do is they look at it and go, okay, I see what they've done here. And then they do the merge. Someone has to manage the merge. It's not automatic, because if we're working on the same files, I make a change, I remove something, you add something. We got to look and see what changes we want to keep and what things we want to discard. Okay, that's how it works. So merging is tricky. Okay, but that's something that we're going to learn to do over a couple of semesters. It's not something you can do unless you have something to merge. So, but good questions. Thank you for that. All right. So that's merging. There's other terminology that you should know, and it's not here. One of them is if we don't use download and upload, and we can't manage Git and GitHub like we do Google Drive. We don't do that. It's not like I have direct access to the folder structure. All I do is I want you to think about GitHub as a container, and I'm going to make a copy or a clone of my project on that container. When I push a change, I push it. That's the terminology. And if you're going to use the changes that I pushed, you're going to pull it. So there's pushing and pulling. Okay. Sometimes we also want to clone stuff. For example, if I work today from my laptop, but I have a desktop at home, which is more powerful and more comfortable to work with and has multiple screens. Most of us have this kind of setup now because of COVID, right? And all that kind of stuff. Then I want to push my files up to GitHub, and then I want to clone everything on my desktop. When I clone everything, cloning keeps all of your commits, all of your changes. If you just download the zip archive from GitHub, you lose all of your commits. That's a negative. We don't want that to happen, because now you're starting up a whole new repository potentially, or you're going to have some conflicts, right? So we don't want to do that. And I'll show you about those things as we go throughout the course. Any questions around terminologies or the stuff we've talked about? Some of this should be familiar with you, for you. Some of it may not. So here's your basic workflow. We create a project, typically in a folder in your computer. We tell our version control system, in this case, Git and GitHub, to track our changes, right, in the folder. And each time our project is in a working state, or you're going to walk away from it, you're going to go to the washroom, you're going to take a break, you're going to end for the night or whatever, you create a commit, right? Lots of times. The reason why we make commits or create commits for our project is every time you add a feature, a change, an update, a bug fix, whatever, the more commits you make, the better it is, because you can always go back to that previous snapshot, okay? If you only make one commit and something happens to your project, you keep working, and then your computer crashes after an hour, you've lost all that work. So it defeats the purpose. We want to be able to make many commits or create many snapshots throughout our development process, okay? That's our basic workflow. So really, there's 3 stages to making a commit. And the 3 stages that we're going to make is some kind of modified, we modify some file, we stage the file, and we committed it. So there's something called, when we stage files, it's almost like I'm marking certain files to be added to the commit snapshot, okay? I can decide which files I want to commit to the snapshot and which files I want to, kind of ignore. All right? And the reason for this is, what if I have large, image files? Sometimes we don't want to put our image files up on GitHub. They might be, each one might be something like, I don't know, maybe 100 megabytes, right? GitHub in general for free has a limit of 100 megabytes per file max, unless you want to use something called large file support. And then they start charging. Okay, so sometimes it makes sense for us not to use those files, or not to put image files and that kind of stuff up on GitHub, and we can mark those files as ignored. Okay, and then you might ask something like, well, But if I want to get my project, how do I get those files back? And there's other ways to do that. But again, what you want to capture is all your code. That's where the things are. We can always replace image files. Okay, that's not a big deal a lot of times. So again, there's a bunch of stages. We modify files, we stage them, then we commit them. That's how it works. Okay. And it works like this. Here's your working directory, and this is right out of the our git-scm website, and I'll talk about where that comes from. And what we do is we stage any fixes or functions or features that we want to add, right? We commit all of those. So again, when we stage everything, we add files to the staging area. It's almost like a middle ground, if you will. And by the way, we can always unstage files if we decide we don't want to include something in our snapshot, okay? And then we commit everything, and it's inside of this hidden.git folder. So there is, when we had version control to our systems, there's always going to be some kind of hidden.git folder. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then when we want to download or pull our project, we can pull it back into the working directory. Yeah.
Do we have something like control with for example?
A Control Z?
Yeah.
No. We have to do it. Well, let me take that back.
Can do the project again and the content, right?
Well, no, you don't have to go that far, but depending on the tool you use, if you use command line, there's commands that you can make to revert. That's your Control Z, right? If you're using a tool like user interface, which we'll talk about, then yes, there might be an undo, right? But typically not. Okay. Okay, so I kind of described that. I'm not going to read those things. Let's talk about the command line. So again, I think people are addicted in many ways to user interfaces, right? They look at a user interface and like, well, it's easy and I want to do this thing. And I think the problem with using a user interface is you don't understand the underlying things that are happening. And I don't need you guys to be experts by the end of the semester, on what exactly happens. We're going to know more specifically what happens. But we're not going to be experts. I don't expect anyone at the end of the semester to be like, I'm an expert and I know exactly what happens, at the file system level. Unnecessary. Okay, that's a little bit too much detail. It's out of scope. But I do need you to understand what happens underneath. So if you want to fix a problem and you use a user interface, then you know what's happening. You're like, okay, so this is probably what the user interface did. How do I fix it? I know how to fix it. Right? So you won't have to start your project over again. That's a worst case scenario. Okay. So command line, I would say if you're using Mac OS or a Windows system, again, I have to talk about this a second. By default, Windows does not include Git command line. It just does not. Okay, so if you try to do Git, let's try it right now. So if you pull up your command line, type in CMD, please. Let's do this together. And if I type git -- version, then you probably, some of you might get something like an unrecognized command. Some of you, right? Yes? Some of you will get that. Other people will get something like this, where they'll say git version 2.37 or whatever, some other version of git, okay? I want to get you guys all on the same version today, and I want you to understand, all the things that we're going to be doing. If you're a Mac person, though, and if you're watching this video, you don't have to do any of this work because Macs have Git installed by default, okay? And this is where some people prefer to use Macs for web development because it's ready to go. Macs are based on a Linux kernel, right? And Linux, of course, has Git installed by default. Windows does not, okay? So we have to make that installation happen for ourselves. All right, so we're going to get back to this. I'm just going to close this off. I just wanted for you to test to see if you have it or not for yourself. Let's talk about installing Git. So again, before we start, we need to install it. And the way to get that is from git-scm.com. Let's do this together, guys. So I'm going to go up to git-scm.com. That is the place to get Git for Windows. And what I want you guys all to do is download this go here and download it. If you click download for Windows, there is a 64-bit installer for Windows. That's the one I want you to launch. And I want to go through it with you. This, even for those people who already have Git installed, I want you guys to understand the process, just in case you want to set this up on another system manually yourself, or you know, you want to set it up at home. Let's say you have it here, but you don't have it at home and you want to get it done. How do we do that? I've already got it downloaded. So let's see if I can just launch it. Here it is. And I've been doing this all week, last week, so with other teams, and I'm going to do the same thing with you guys. So let's just go to this. And all I want to do is start with this screen here. So this is the first part of installing Git for Windows. Okay. Again, if you're a Mac person, you have nothing to do, right? This is just for Windows people. All right, next, let's click next. The first screen is, you know, just the intro screen. A couple things to note here. When you install Git for Windows, you have a bunch of things you can turn on and off. I want you to turn everything on except for Git large file support. So no large file support, please. We don't need that. And also, I don't need you guys to check daily for Git for Windows updates. That's not required. By the way, if I'm going too fast, or if you miss this installation sequence, or somehow you don't have admin rights on your machine or whatever, remember, always remember, every single time we get together, guys, I'm recording everything. So you can always go back, go up on Blackboard, take a look at the recording. If I'm going too fast, or if you need closed captioning support when I'm doing through this or whatever, and look at it and understand what we've done again. Okay, so there's always a chance to see this stuff again. All right, so this is what I want. So the only one I'm not checking is Git large file support and check daily for Git Windows updates. I'm going to click next. The next one is what default editor do you want to use? Again, not super important, but because we have Visual Studio Code installed, I want you to select Visual Studio Code as Git's default editor. Okay, and then click next. The next one is this thing that I talked about earlier. We moved away from the master branch, and we're moving into the main branch. I want you to let Git decide. That might change in the future. So please just let Git decide. That's just the default option. Okay, and click next. Now, this is where I made the change. So adjusting your path environment. One of the things to make Git work locally is we want to definitely use Git on the command line. So I'm going to use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. That's what I'm going to do. So that's the third option here instead of the first option. Okay, typically the default option is the top one. I'm making a change and I'm saying do this one. Okay, the bottom one. And click the next. For the next two, I'm going to select the defaults. One of them is use bundled OpenSSH. I'm keeping that one. And I'm also using the OpenSSL library. I'm not going to worry about having my own default or my own external file. By the way, in some studios, they want you to use their own SSL program because they bought it. As an example, they want it to be more secure. Instead of using OpenSSL, they have something else. They want you to use a VPN to get in there and whatever. And you may need to do that to use GitHub properly in Git. Next. Configuring the line ending, I'm just going to keep the defaults. I think that's pretty good for us right now. Again, depending on where you are, that might change. Click next. This is where I did make a change. Configuring the terminal emulator to use with Git Bash. I'm going to use Windows default console window. I don't like min-tty. That's just me. Okay, so I'm going to use the Windows default console window on the bottom here and click next. This one is the default option when it comes to pulling from using Git. It's going to be fast forward or merge. That's what Git pull will mean. Okay, I'm not going to rebase or something else and click next. And this is an important one. I recommend you definitely select this one. And when you install Git for Windows now, the Git credential manager is way better, and we need to have this installed. So please make sure you install the Git credential manager if you haven't done that already. Click next. When it comes to configuring extra options, I want you to check both, enable file system caching and enable symbolic links. I think this will help. But for the next one, for experimental stuff, I don't want you guys to do anything experimental. So make sure these two are unchecked for the experimental options. And then click install, please. Okay, and once you're done, I'm going to wait for that to be done. I've already done it, so you don't have to. I want you to tell me when you're ready, if I do again, git ---- version, if you've installed Git for Windows properly. Please do that now. Okay, so it should be installed. By the way, going too fast, or if you don't want to do this right now, you want to do it at home later, you can, but chances are you'll have to do the in-class exercise later too. Right, so, sorry? How do you get the screen? So you go to your Windows button on the bottom left here, the menu, and just type in CMD right away. CMD. And then press enter. There you go. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to wait for a second. How are we doing? Are we good? Did you guys get it done? Okay, I'm just going to walk around, make sure you guys are good. And for those people who are watching on Zoom, one second. Good. Still. So guys, one thing to note is if you have your command prompt open and then you did your installation, remember it's an instance of the command line. You need to close that instance down and you launch it. All right, speaking of that, it's not working. Try that first. Yeah. Is it working out? Good. How about you ladies? Everything okay? You okay?
Well, I think that I'm having like a small, but also, well, having this situation, how they would like to be, like what we talked about, and stuff.
You know why? All right. How about everyone else? Are you guys good? Okay. How about you guys? You're all good? Yeah. Bottom there. Yeah, no, it's fine. Second one. Next. 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 Both of them. Next. And we just wait it. So. Okay, good. Yes. Bottom ones. Yeah, uncheck hit by passport. Oh, yeah. Take that one. I'm going to take the top ones. Good. Next. Next. Okay. Next. Bottom. Next. 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 Bottom. Next. 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 One, two. Next. Let's start with next. Excellent. Okay, so I think most of us have got it done. We'll take a short break soon, guys, because I only run about an hour, and then my voice starts giving out. So in about another 5 or 10 minutes, we'll stop and take a short break before we go. All right, so we've installed Git for Windows. Most of us have done it, the way I've asked. It's fine. Even if you didn't do it, remember you can always watch the recording and do it again, right? And it's not going to hurt you. So this is what you should see: 2.37.1 Windows 1. That's what you should see. One thing to note is when you first start using Git for Windows from command line, you will need to configure your global username. So please do this now. This is the command that I want you to use. Okay, so git config ---- global user.name, and the username that you want to appear whenever you do a commit. That is the name that you want. Okay, so you could put your full name. I put me, Tom Siriopoulos. You might put whatever your name is. Okay. For the second one, though, this is important. Make sure you put in the email address of the account that you're going to use for GitHub. Or if you have an account on GitHub, that's the email address you want to associate with this one. Okay. Because otherwise it's going to ask you to log in and there's going to be a conflict. So please do that. You need to do this before you do any other commits, because if you do a commit before you do this, it's going to ask you, I don't know who you are, right? What are you trying to do? All right, so please do this configuration detail right now. By the way, a lot of times we already have this done. All you're doing, if you do it now with me, is just resetting it to whatever it's going to be. Okay. And by the way, remember, you have access to these slides on Blackboard ahead of time. I try and put them up ahead. So if I go too fast, you can always go to the slides and go forward. Okay, hopefully you guys have done those two commands, right? And we're going to move on to the next screen. So here are the steps, and I'm going to talk about them before we do them, okay? Whenever we use Git, the first thing we want to do is do a git init. That is the first command I want you guys to learn. And I'm just going to go over them first, and then I'm actually going to do them with you, okay? So git init initializes the Git repository in the folder that you're in. Please make sure when you do a git init, you do not do it in some kind of containing folder for your entire operating system. Like, for example, the C drive. That would be catastrophic. Don't do that kind of stuff. And I mean that in terms of everything then, like we're talking about 50,000 files might be part of your Git repository. We don't want that, okay? So please do not do git init unless it's in a working folder that you're using for your workspace. That's where it belongs, okay? Not in some containing folder like a C drive or D drive or E drive or something like that. People have done that in the past and like, Tom, I don't know why, but I have my entire operating system trying to go up on GitHub. No, please don't do that, okay? It's possible. Next, after we do a git init in the folder we want to do a git add dot, okay? Git add adds files to the staging area. Remember that's middle area? We check off files we want to add to that, right? Dot says we can actually add the file name itself. For example, readme.md. We can add that directly, or I can use dot and it adds everything. Git add dot, okay? So that's the second command. The third one is, and what you have to do every single time, is a commit. Git commit minus M for message. And then when you first do the first time, when this is the first time you've run Git in a particular folder, we need to do something like, by convention, initial commit or first commit. That's what we want, all right? If we do that and we work in a studio, people are going to understand what you're doing, okay? If you don't do that and you say something weird, they're going to be like, where's your first commit? Where's your baseline, right? Some people are real sticklers about this. Some people don't care, right? But I'm just telling you, this is typically what we do. This by convention, what we do, right? So those are the three to start things off. That's Git basics, all right? I want you to think about what this really does, though. Remember, GitHub is distributed system. That's what it is. It's software as a service. It's a cloud, okay? That's what we're looking at, remember? And there's more than one service out there that gives you Git support on the cloud, like GitLab and Bitbucket. Depending on the organization, they might have their own private cloud that you put stuff up on as well, right? And why do you think that is? Why do you think an organization would have their own private cloud as opposed to using GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab? Anybody? Why would I want a private cloud for my organization? Yep. Less to hacking. And what if I have proprietary systems and tools in my application? And what if I'm really nervous of my intellectual property that's going to be stolen by somebody else, right? I don't want that, so I have a private cloud, right? A lot of times we do that. For us, we can mark repositories, both public and private. For today, we're going to mark it as public. But going forward, after today, for every in-class exercise after this, I want you to mark them all as private, right? And you're going to include me as a collaborator, all right? And we're going to be talking about how to do that next week. Okay, this week is let's just get going, okay? So again, we have our local repository in our local development environment, and then we're going to push everything out to the remote repository. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay. If you haven't set up a GitHub account right now, please do so now. Okay. So this is where you'd go, https://github.com, enter your user details as shown in the screen, and start, please create your own GitHub repository. For this course, and for every course that you have with me going forward, I have a repository called Georgian College. All right. Yes, I own Georgian College. That's right. Right. All of it. It's me. Right. I'm serious. I have, this is my organization. I've had it since the beginning. I stole it before anyone else got to it. It's me. It's mine. Right. I also own Centennial College, George Brown College. I'm not joking around. I got all those organizations. They're all mine. They're all mine. Right. And no one's bothered me so far. Well, maybe one professor said, "Can I get access?" Because I also work at Georgia. I'm like, no. Right. But no, I'm lying. But the thing is, at the end of the day, this is where I'm going to be sharing a lot of your files. So if I share things like anything that's in class exercise that we share together, if I do it, it's going to be shared here. That's where I'm going to do it with you. So, and there's another thing, another rule for us to follow together. Anything I share with you is fair game. Okay, you can use it to do whatever you want. Okay, unless otherwise specified. Unless I say you can't use this, right? If I don't say that, use whatever code I give you. Right, you can use it. That's the point of being together and sharing stuff in the lab, right? Okay, so this is it, so you'll be seeing a lot of my code in here. Even this my new repo that I used to build this thing last time. Okay, and we're going to come back to my new repo in a second. I made this just for you today. Okay, and we're going to get rid of it. All right, so that is the first thing. So first, you need a GitHub account for this course, because every single time you upload an in-class exercise, or what I call an ICE, in-class exercise, then you're going to be uploading or giving me your GitHub link. Okay, about that. If you give me a GitHub link and it's completely empty, like in other words, you didn't upload, you didn't push anything, it's useless, right? If you give me a GitHub link and it's not properly formed, example, I don't know, you're missing folders, files, whatever, you're going to get marks off, right, for that. If you give me a GitHub link and it's inaccessible, and I mean that like you made it private and you didn't include me, you'll get 0, right, for those things. I need access. I can't look at your code unless you give me access. So please make it something that you do, take it seriously. It's worth 4% of your final grade, this whole process. That's why I'm going through it in such detail, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't care, right? I'm not going to ask you to upload your zip archives or RAR or anything else like that. Only GitHub. That's all I want from you guys. And that's dangerous, which means if you don't give me GitHub and I can't look at your files, I can't give you a mark. It's kind of one thing that I'm asking you for. On that, please don't bury your GitHub link inside of a file, inside of a zip archive, inside of another folder that you're putting up on Blackboard. Make it so that it's that I can clearly look at it, like on Blackboard. When you submit, give me your GitHub repo, right? A link to your GitHub repo. Again, it has to be working. It has to be properly formed. I have to have access to it. Those are the 3 things. Okay, so please make sure you do that. Okay. When you make a repository for the first time, and I've kind of done that, but I'm going to do it again from scratch, but I'm going to do it in reverse order. So let's go up on GitHub right now. And I have this repository up on Georgian College right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete it. And we're going to do this again from scratch. Take a look. So here's my Georgian College, my new repo, that I made for you yesterday. And I'm going to delete it. Now, one thing to note is on GitHub, you're going to see several, links here at the top. I want you to consider these links like tabs, right, in your repository. At the end, there's a settings tab. If I want to delete something after I've created it, I can go to settings. And by the way, the settings tab is also where you're going to get things like, how do I add people as collaborators, right? I can do everything from settings. If I scroll all the way down, there's going to be a danger zone. And the danger zone allows me to delete this repository. So I'm going to click delete this repository. And then what you do with that is you take the name of the repository in, even if you copy paste it, it's okay. And then you can delete it. Okay, it may ask you to log in, all right, to do that. But then now the repository is gone. If you're going to try and get to that repository now, it would show a 404, found not found. Okay. Funny thing about found not found, since we're talking about right now, right? 404, 4F, right? Starts with an F. Not is the 0. Not is also 0 in, England. People say not instead of 0 a lot of times. And 4, file not found, 404, right? That's where they came to that with that code. A lot of the codes we program with on the web come from developers who are making jokes and who want to remember those kind of things. So that's what's coming from. Okay, I want to make new repository now. How do I do it? Remember, I'm assuming that, and I'm doing this in reverse order. I'm assuming that we have a repository locally we've been working with, and I'm going to do that with you in a bit, okay? But if I want to make a repository on GitHub, how do I do so? I need to go to my account. So please, let's practice. Go to your account right now, and let's just make a throwaway repository that we're gonna delete. Okay, again. Okay. So a couple ways to get there. What you can do is you can click on this plus, in your account, or you can click on something like this, new repository. Doesn't really matter. Both do the same thing. If I click new repository, and if you're using an organization, example, Georgian College, one thing that you can do in GitHub is you can create organizations. So I was joking around earlier. Of course, I don't own Georgian College, but I own the organization. And this is a global organization. No one else can use Georgian College anywhere in the world, right? So that's why people may come to me and say, Tom, can I get access to that? Because, I work for Georgia. And then you want to create the repository name. The repository name must be unique. Okay, the coding that I'm going to use for you and your class this semester is going to be something like, you can do whatever, COMP2112 in the fall 2022 semester. So that's where I start off. That's what that means, F2022, okay? And then dash the week that I'm working in with you guys, like for example, week 2, which is this week, right? Notice that there's a check mark on the end when I create my repository. That means that it's allowable, I can use it. Otherwise, if it was something that you've already created, there would be an X here, a red X. I have an option to make public or private. At one point, private repositories on GitHub were a cost. You had to pay for it, the pro version of GitHub. Now, anyone can get unlimited private repositories. For today, I want you to make them public, okay? So I don't want you to worry about private. And I don't need you to add a README file or a gitignore file or a license or any of these things. Leave these as is and just click Create Repository, please. When you do so, right, GitHub is going to give you steering instructions. Remember those commands we said earlier? Git init, git add, git commit, they're all here, right? So if you forget some of those commands, you can always go up here and just literally follow these instructions, except for this one. I wouldn't do git add readme, I would do git add dot. Dot means add everything, okay? And then the rest is pretty much good to go. Yes.
Is there any reason do we need to really going to be 5 files? Or did not let me background because you suggested that instead of asking the reason out that just it's important.
I mean, the question is, do I need to track individual files, or should I put everything up all the time? I think it really depends on the use case. To me, for us, it's okay if you track everything, right? And there's going to be something called a gitignore file that we're going to use during this semester. And the gitignore file that we're going to develop is going to allow us not to track certain files and folders. A good example of that is node modules, right? Node modules, we didn't write node modules. That's been written by some third party. Do I need really to track node modules for some third party on my GitHub account? No. So we can ignore those. And we can use a gitignore for that instead of tracking individual adds. So instead of git add this, but I don't want to git add that. No. Git add everything, but have a git ignore file that ignores certain things I don't want to add to my staging area. That's a little bit more efficient. However, there might be instances where you want to add a file you forgot. Example, oh crap, I forgot a README file. Let's make it a README file and add that to the staging area and then create a commit. That's what that's for. It gives you more granular control if you need to. Yeah. Okay, so these are the commands we're going to use, and this is what this does. This is an example of how you would do it. And I'm going to keep this up here. Again, if you made some other name, go through the process and see if you can delete it as an exercise, okay? Or if you use in-class exercise 1 as your name, that's acceptable as well. It doesn't matter how you give it to me as long as it makes sense, okay? Remember that before you create your repository, you can always rename whatever the repository is, and it'll give you a new link. Notice the link on the top here. This is a global link for your account. The account, there's an account, and then there's the link for the repository. This is the link for the repository, okay? I don't need you to give me your account, which would be this. If you just went here to Georgian College, let's say this is your account name. I don't need this. That's just your whole account. I want the specific link that I want, which is this one, okay? All right, so we've created this thing. It's ready for us. We haven't put anything up there right now. It's empty. It's an empty container, like we said before. And this is a great segue into actually doing some good stuff with us together and making our JavaScript stuff and everything else later on. But for now, I want to finish off the installations, and then we'll take a short break, okay? And when we take a short break and we come back, we'll actually do some JavaScript, okay? The last installation I want to do, leave that alone. The last installation I want to do now, I'm just going to skip through here. By the way, it talks about all this stuff in the PowerPoint slides. I just didn't want to read them because I know how to do it. So just leave those alone. There's also a couple things I need to talk about where, what if, you know, you really hate command line and you don't want to ever use it, and you're one of those people, right? I'm not going to take offense. I'm not going to be hurt by it, okay? I'm not going to cry, and I'm not going to get angry at you for not using command line, all right? However, if you come to me and say, I don't know how to fix this problem, and you're like, but I don't know how to use command line, I'm going to be like, okay, well, I tried to help you, but that's why we did this in the beginning. Most of the time, there are great tools out there that can help you do things quickly, right? The 3 tools that I recommend if you're going to use a user interface are, and there's no particular order, depending on what you're doing. Source Tree, which is a very free tool that you can use. It's used in a lot of organizations for free. Gitkraken, which I personally like a lot. There's a lot of really cool features. It's very graphical. You can actually see the your branches and your commits, and they look nice. They're blue sometimes, or green, nice user interface. And the other one is GitHub Desktop. GitHub Desktop probably is the most no-frills version. It comes from GitHub itself, as an example, and it's super easy to use. Okay, so those are the 3. You can choose to use one of these, all of them, or none of them. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day how you put your stuff up on GitHub, as long as your GitHub repo is properly formed, I have access to it, and it's working properly, right? So if you have those things, I'm okay. I can't tell at the end of the day what you're going to do, but I'm trying to guide you and what I think is the right thing to do. And the right thing for me is command line, right? The right thing for you may not be command line if you get really frustrated, right? So always have a backup, right? So if you say to me like, Tom, my command line is not working. I got a new computer and I can't remember how to install stuff. Okay, use the tool. It doesn't matter, right? Or I'm not comfortable using command line. I'm really afraid I'm going to screw something up and break my computer. Okay, use a tool. Doesn't matter. All right, so that's UI stuff. Let's talk about NVM and Node.js as the next installation step, and then we'll take a short break. So in this course, we will touch Node.js, and Node.js is a very common back-end technology where we use JavaScript on the back end instead of on the front end. And there's a whole course for you on Node.js and Express and all that kind of stuff after this one. Again, we talked about this earlier, which is server-side scripting. However, we're going to be using Node.js and NPM, the Node Package Manager, to download and install third-party packages, tools, JavaScript libraries, whatever, right? And so I need you guys to download this and install it. Now, there are a couple ways to do this, and you can certainly directly download this for Windows and Mac OS, right? However, like I say here, I do not recommend it. And this is why, right? I install Node.js today, and then next week, or next month, or next year in 2023, you got to do it again, and you have to install it again. Why? Because if you're working with another professor, let's say Rich Freeman, let's say you're going to be your server-side scripting professor. I'm just making this up. I don't know if it's going to be true. Maybe he might want you to download and install version whatever of Node.js. Like right now, we're sitting at version, our bleeding edge version is 18.9.0. But what if he wants to use the long-term support version, which is 16.17.0? What if he wants to use that one, right? What are you going to do? Uninstall and reinstall? guys, it's a pain in the ass. We don't want to do that kind of stuff. So what do? We use something called the Node Version Manager, right? Which is way better in terms of our process. Now, there's a bit of installation, I have to admit. And what I want you guys to do is go to this page here, which is github.com, Corey Butler, nvm-windows, right? He's come up with this, these guys here have come up with their own, I'm just gonna go there for you to show you what this looks like. It looks like a GitHub repository, right? And if you scroll down, there is documentation around how to use NVM and all that kind of stuff, okay? If you scroll down, it talks about, feedback and all that kind of stuff. And it says over here, download now. See this area that says download now? That's where I want you to click, download now, right? And when you do that, it's going to take you to this release link. And the release link, if you scroll down, has that exact picture I showed you in the PowerPoint, which is nvmsetup.exe. Please do that now and follow the instructions. It's really like next. Okay, it's not. There's not like for me a serious installation. Make sure though, I'm going to put my hand up right now. Make sure that your command lines are closed. Right, so turn off your command line if it's on. Like if you have this running right now, turn it off. Right, so close it, shut it down, and then run nvmsetup.exe, please. All right, and follow the instructions. At the end, what you're going to get is something that looks like this. I should be able to do NVM version, and I should get 1.1.9. Please do that now, and I'll wait for you. Okay. And so why this? Why not just directly download, and whatever? Yeah, we can certainly do that. And if you have a problem with this, you can do it. I'm not going to get mad again, right? But it's just going to cause you heartache. It's going to happen. You're going to go to next semester and Rich is going to ask you to do something different. And then you have to uninstall and reinstall. And then, what happens if you want to install this on your system at home? What if you want to keep up with the latest changes? NVM is for you, right? And by the way, NVM exists for Mac and Linux systems. Is that a question? Okay, yeah. Good to go? Okay, install it? Yes. Good. You install it? Right. So please make sure you get to this point and you've got NVM version 1.1.9, right? Installed. And then when you do, are you guys good over here? Good. It's super easy install. All right. Like that's why I'm telling you this is the better way to do it. When you're here, if I just type in NVM, if you got to here, you'll see that there's a lot of little things you can do. It's a little tool that's been written in C++ for you, right? And if you expand this, it tells you that one of the main commands, typically when you download something from npm, right? And you're going to use some kind of package manager, it goes like this. Package manager name, example, npm, yarn, Gradle, Maven, whatever you're going to use, right? Space, some kind of verb, install, add, remove, whatever you're going to do. And then what you want to modify. For example, this program, this package, this whatever. So we might do npm install, yarn add, or nvm install. The verb is what we want to do now. And the easiest way to get things installed is if you do this, issue this command now, if you've got nvm installed. Nvm install latest. Try that. And if you do, it may ask you for administrative rights too. And if it does, you can run an administrative command prompt. And the way you would do such a thing is you go to your command prompt, CMD, right? And you can run as administrator, worst case scenario. Okay, if it asks you for an administrative command prompt. So the command you want to issue is nvm install latest. And if you do that, you're going to have the latest version installed. Okay, 18.9. That's right. Yeah. And the way this works is there is additional things you can see here. There is another command, and you can always go nvm use and then that version. If you want to look to see what versions you have installed, you can always issue an nvm list. An nvm list will give you the version that's currently installed or in use. Okay, so you can say something like, I want to use this version. What if I wanted to install some other version? Let me show you how that works. So if I want to shift between two versions, I can say something like nvm install, and then 18.0.0. And then what it'll do is it'll go out, grab 18.0.0 for some reason, and then install it, right? It'll extract it and put it into my system. There it is. But if I go NVM list, right, you can see that I have both versions now, right? Except for the starred version is the one that I'm currently using, which is 18.1.0, right? But notice that what we said was online. If I go to Node.js, nodejs.org, right? If I go to Node.js, it's 18.9.0. I've got 18.1.0. I need to update, right? I don't want to install Node, right? I want to install the latest version. So I can just do something like nvm install latest. And if I did that, it's going to download 18.9.0, which is what you've done today, okay? What I need to do is if I have multiple versions of Node installed, let's just clear the screen and do an NVM list now. You can see that I have 18.1.0 currently in use, but I want to use 18.9. I'm going to say NVM use and then 18.9.0. Oops. And if I do that, it's going to sometimes give me something that looks like this. Access is denied, like I told you. Sometimes. For you, it might just work, okay? For me, I've set up my system so there's extra protections or whatever. It's going to ask me to do an administrative command prompt. What that means is I should shut down my command prompt that I have right now and pull up my new command prompt. But instead of pressing enter, I want to use run as administrator. If I run as administrator, it's going to ask me to do it. I'm going to say yes. And then I can just do the same thing. I can say NVM list. And then I'm going to say NVM use and then 18.9.0. And then it's going to switch, no problem. And I can uninstall stuff too. I can say NVM uninstall 18.1.0, right? That was the last version I had. I can also NVM uninstall 18.0.0 because that's what I just downloaded just to throw away. And then if I do an NVM list, you can see now I'm on par with you, 18.9.0. By the way, I did all that just so you can see the process. This is awesome because now what you should be able to do is do something that looks like this. I'm just going to pull up a regular command prompt because administrative command prompt can be destructive. I'm just going to pull up a regular command prompt. And if I do a node -- version now, please try that. You should have the 18.9.0 come up. Yes? Does anyone not have that? Or get some weird unrecognized command or something like that? You shouldn't. Yes. So did you shut down your yeah. And unrecognized command? Okay. Okay, but I'm telling you, that's what I do it. So let's just shut this down again, put your command prompt down and try again. Yeah, let's make it. Let's do node -30. Okay. All right. And you shut down your command prompt and start reverting that to me. All right, so to fix this problem for people who need to be fixed, right? Let's talk about fixing your problems. We don't want to reinstall NVM because NVM is clearly installed, right? As an example. So what we can do is I want you guys to go to your Windows Start button and type in advanced system settings. Advanced, if I can actually type advanced. Oh, there it is. Advanced system settings. You're going to get this. What we want to check here is your environment variables. So all computers have something called a path, right? And the path doesn't matter whether it's Linux or Windows machine or whatever, you have a path, right? And I want to go to the environment variables. Now, if you're working, guys, please do not do this. I don't want you to screw things up because you can stop yourself from working this way too. And by the way, you can stop yourself from having anything work if you make a mistake here. All right, so please be careful. If I go to my environment variables, right, you're going to see that there are two sections. There's the top section here that is local installations, and there's the bottom section here that is your system installations. Your local installations are just for you. The system installations are for everyone that uses your system. Like, let's say if you're sharing your system with somebody else, like multiple accounts on the same system. So if you're sharing your system with somebody else, sometimes their installations can clash with your own. What we want to look at is the path for the top one. Okay, let's go there first. And by the way, look, notice where MVM home is. It says users. MVM Symlink is here. MVM home is here. It says see users, Tom. You should have this. MVM home and MVM Symlink, right? You should have those two things, yeah? How about your path? The path, oops, not that one. The path, a lot of times, if you have an older version of NPM installed, an older version, right? Then it also could be causing your issues. Here's something that you want to do. You may want to do something that looks like this, right? First of all, in your app data, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there is a NVM has been installed in your app data. Anything that's in the path is what I'm saying is going to be something that you need. One thing that you may need is in terms of your system, you may need to put in the path for your Node.js. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So if I look at the actual files and folders on your system, right? And if I go to our system folder, and if I go to programs, let's do this together. Then underneath there, I may have, depending on your installation, a Node.js link, right? And Node.js is what we want installed. This is the latest version of Node.js that's been installed here. And notice it says 2022-09-12. That's today, right? So that's where it got installed. And so that is probably what's going to fix your problems. If you go here and put in the link to your Node.js, C:\program files Node.js. You can add one by double clicking, by just double clicking here, or you can, and when you do that, if you press OK, it should fix your problem. Let me see if that works for you guys. You have that link in there, like Node.js in here? Put it in. So I'm saying go to C:, go to C, go to C, go to project, program files. Right, go to Node.js, go to them. That's a problem, and that's why it's not working. There's Node.js has never been installed in your system. So we're gonna have to do this again. Yeah, and what do you have Node.js installed? See that. You don't have it. Yeah. You have no idea. So what I want you to do is I want you to go back to your endpoint. So have it NVM list. So NVM install, NVM space install. Place install, please. There you go. Now after you do this, you're going to do NVM use. It's NVM back to the NVM use. NVM use. Okay, so now we we're going to administrator, so the then counts, administrator, look at two seconds. Do that. And then now, so no -130.
No one will do the mode, I'll have them, they will be like that.
How about you?
install. Yeah. Like, now I'm just. And then do a node, once, later. Wonderful. Okay, so I think, does anyone else have issues? You have issues too? I think most of us are ready to go. We'll figure it out. That's fine. Okay, so. So it sounds like. And you never were to install. I would try reinstalling again. Try and work on the window. Close the window. That's not the way that I want to do stuff. If you can do that, yes. But why wouldn't you? I'm telling you, it's fine. If you can do it, you want to do it. Okay. It's not, but it's okay. All right, so most of us have an NVM and Node installed, and now that we've done that, I think this is a great place to stop and take a short break, guys. Let's take we're sitting at 9:34. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back at, let's say, 9:45, right? And we'll continue. All right. I'm going to pause the recording right now, and then I'll restart it afterwards.